Joe, excited to have another conversation with you this morning. Thanks for joining. I know we've done a handful of these in the past, so excited to add another chapter to the book today. But for those that haven't had a chance to meet you before, would love to maybe just start with telling us a little bit more about your career at ADP. I know you started in sales, but have really moved into the direction of product and strategy and innovation. So tell us more about kind of what you've done and what you're working on today.
Brad, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. Always a pleasure. I enjoy your newsletters very, very much. I enjoy your interactions. I think you got a great line of sight across, the HR ecosystem and HR tech in particular. So I've been a lifer in HR tech, you know that. So it was never my strategy when I was jumping out of college to be in the HR tech arena my whole career. But it's really fun. It's a great place to be, and it continues to move and evolve. But my career primarily has been in sales leadership, leading big teams across the country in our small business arena, in our major accounts, mid-market arena. And, at that point, I knew I wanted to do something drastically different. And that's why I jumped into the product strategy side of the house. And it's been a really fun last 5 years on that journey, hence where we got acquainted and got to meet each other.
Yeah, I think whoever it was that put us in contact definitely knew that we were kindred spirits in the way that we found some weird fascination with this space and could chat about it on end. But tell us more about ADP Ventures, what you guys do, and maybe even get into a little bit of the philosophy. I think there's always that conversation: build, buy, invest. So how do you guys kind of run those analysis over there?
Yeah, listen, it's probably one of the more exciting pieces of what I get to do day in and day out is innovation. And the ventures team at ADP is really broken up into two sectors. One is all about products that we grow from the ground up, that we create. That's one arm. And the other arm is more about making thoughtful investments into HR tech and into technologists in the market, in the HR arena. And that's really fun too. And we do it very deliberately and very surgically based on, finding categories that either complement what we do, and or maybe round out areas that we are not in today. And that's what we're usually looking to do, is to get really close to tech, really close to startups, and really close to brilliant people that do brilliant things. And today, obviously, many of them are weaving in AI and agents and so forth. But that's not only where we're investing, but that arm of build, partner, buy now includes invest. And it really becomes the fourth leg to the stool on how we think about product innovation, product strategy, and where we're going in the future. And it kind of makes ADP unique. And many do not think of us as a technology company or a highly innovative technology company, but guess what? We are. And, we're putting our money where our mouth is by being a corporate ventures fund and investing in technologists. So it's really been a fun journey. I would say the last 2 years since we've gotten serious with the ventures arm. So, I know we've gotten a chance to interact a little bit there, but there's a lot that goes into when do you build organically? When do you bring in a strategic partner and maybe white label? When do you invest? And then, big picture, when do you acquire? And each one of them has unique reasons why you do it. And the cool part is you often do elements of all four throughout a life cycle. They really start to play together along the way. And I think it's really the entry point into a conversation is a starting point, but doesn't mean that that's the end point. The entry point into how you start to interact in a category is where you start, but then it may evolve quickly from there. And, I think throughout our discussion here, I might, cite a couple really good examples of areas that we've done that. But hopefully that, like, good context, good perspective in the question of innovation and where kind of, how ADP thinks about it.
Yeah, I would imagine when you guys are doing those investments, ADP as a capital partner is a really exciting opportunity for the entrepreneur, just given the scale, the expertise, the customer base you guys have. Is that something that you guys are positioning as a big value add, is kind of having ADP on the cap table?
Yeah, listen, I mean, we have an unfair advantage when we talk to different founders because we've got the envy of the market with, over 1 million clients, and we've got, upwards of 10,000 sellers. And when you think about distribution, I mean, those are two really, really strong points that you get to play within, whether it's again the client base or the sellers. So many different, founders and tech companies want to tap into that ecosystem, obviously. So it really is almost like an unfair advantage. So we've got a really great conference coming up next month called Transform. We're a key partner in, and ADP Ventures has a piece of the puzzle there where we have our summit going on, and we have a long list of companies, A, that we're interested in talking to, and B, that are interested in talking to us. But that intersection of our reach across the globe is really attractive, and scale is what most tech companies, as they're past their idea stage and trying to become a revenue generating company. Scale is everything. If you can't get from point A to point B with your idea and your tech, like it's not going to go far. So you really need to scale, and that's where often our investments can help them scale along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I see it just in our very small vantage point when founders find us and are like, oh man, like this might be a chance for us to amplify our brand, get in front of buyers. But, at ADP, it's, a million times that scale. So, yeah, incredible opportunity. And you mentioned a second ago, just sort of this public perception of like maybe people who have used ADP a decade ago or only used it maybe as an end employee that might think of it as just a payroll processor or something like that. But what would you kind of highlight or bring data to really shine a light to folks on ADP as an innovative solution, innovative technology company in this HCM space?
Yeah, listen, it's sometimes hard to shed a brand that's 75 years old. And at ADP we don't try to shed the brand. I mean, we are infinitely proud of who we were when we started, who we've been, who we are today, and where we're going. We're really proud of it, and it's about those storytelling, and it's about getting the message out and letting buyers in the market just understand what our evolution is. And I often, will say, hey, go look at the scoreboard. And the scoreboard being the past. And the past is often a great indicator of the future. And in our case, we have had a legacy of innovation throughout our entire life cycle. We've been first to market in many, I won't say every, but many different categories of HCM along the way. First to market, creating. I would really say the scoreboard matters. History tells a story, and go look at all the innovation we've done and all the groundbreaking innovation we've done to date, and then come watch what's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years, because ADP is at the forefront of all this incredible change, obviously driven by a lot of AI and agentic AI. So it will evolve. We know that. Where it evolves, hard to predict. Although I think, Brett, you've done an incredible job in having a point of view here and predicting maybe where this world goes in the SaaS world that we both sit in. So who knows? But that's the brand that we are, and we're proud of it. But hopefully, many start to understand we've evolved quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the story that we're often telling clients about ADP is, you've got on one side of the market, call them disruptors, new kind of private venture-backed companies that are about 10 years old or less. And then you've got what I would say like legacy providers on the other side of the market, which, you know, for lack of a better word, head in the sand, times have passed them by, not really having a pulse on things. And then I think ADP sits in this real sweet spot in the middle where it's, seeing where the market's going, investing and developing in those directions, but at the same time having that legacy foundation of excellence, trust, brand recognition, and so I think getting those two things together, it really is a rare best of both worlds for clients. And when we talk about that evolution, what the next couple of years look like, in a minute, I want to talk a little bit about some of the developments and some of the products and innovations you guys are bringing internally, but also want to start maybe with just the external acquisition. The acquisition of Workforce Software last year was one of the biggest in ADP's history. So tell us a little bit more about the thought process that went into that, and why was that such a can't miss opportunity?
Yeah, listen, I'm glad you brought it up, and that's, probably a great example of when we believe that acquisition was the right pillar. And if you look at the big world of time and attendance, and the relationship it has within HCM, I mean, payroll and time have always been in a symbiotic relationship, obviously. Can't kind of do one without the other effectively. So you got to do both extremely well with rigor, with compliance, with accuracy, all of that. And, we've been in every element of that build, partner, buy, invest world within time because it's that big, it's that complex, and there's been plenty of products that we built from the ground up, really in our small business group, our major accounts group for more elementary time, not highly complex time, and we have wonderful products there. We've also have some key strategic partners historically in a couple different elements of time. And in this case, we knew it was the right time, no pun intended, to acquire and to acquire the leader in highly complex transformational time products on the market. And that's what Workforce Suite was and is still today. So we knew acquiring that was important, but really for two predominant reasons. One, we knew they were the best technology in the market and they could solve highly complex, very large, payrolls out there across the globe. And the second is that word, the globe. So they operate really well across the globe in all the right key countries. And, one of our key strategic pillars and initiatives in the future is to dominate the globe just like we do domestic. And therefore we knew having a time engine that could do that for us and do it extremely well in complex situations was paramount, hence worth the premium that we paid. And it was the biggest acquisition to date. And that decision doesn't get made lightly. It took quite a bit of time. It was actually over, a period of time to really build consensus. But when it's right, it's right. And here we are, well over a year past the acquisition, and we're beating projections. We're moving the needle on the integration experience, and most importantly, prospects and clients are kind of voting with their feet because they're jumping into the new time world with Workforce Suite readily. So I'm really happy about it. I'm really proud of it. But the future is really bright across our global sales, focus with them.
Kind of interpreting from that answer earlier, you're talking about, build, buy, invest, partner, what that calculus looks like. And it sounds like there's almost a matrix here of how complex would this be to build or kind of seed and watch grow, and how critical is it to day-to-day functioning, right? And so with this Workforce Software acquisition, it's both, right? It's time is so critical, and this is a really hard thing to get right. So that's kind of more of a, let's go out and get the right thing and put it in place right away, versus, something that's more on the periphery. Maybe we just spread some bets around and see what grows. But is that kind of a fair assessment of how you guys would look at a strategy?
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story. When I first jumped from sales leadership into product strategy, I had a lot of key mentors that were teaching me the strategy side of the business, the product side of the business, because I didn't grow up in those two functional areas, and someone kind of put in front of me a very easy slide to read, and like I like pictures, and I like things that are really easy to understand, but it was the convergence of three dimensions of good, fast, and cheap. And if you could just think of a picture that's got three big circles, and the intersection of those three is like a dot in the middle, which doesn't really exist. It's a unicorn. It's a utopia. Something that's really good, that you could build really fast, and really cheap. Like that does not exist. So with that said, the question really, presented to me at the time was take two of three. You can't get all three. So when you pick two out of three, one of the third is going to be left alone. And every sales organization wants speed to market, obviously. So speed doesn't always dictate cost or quality. So if you want speed to be your defining decision, you got to invest heavily into it to get great quality. Or on the flip side, if you want speed to be your defining decision, and you want to put incredible quality into it, you're going to have a problem if you don't invest heavily into it. So like, two of three is the marriage. Typically, all three is a unicorn that doesn't really exist. So it's a little bit of like the thinking that goes into what you're trying to solve for with build, partner, buy, invest. It really is like, and I think the one word is expertise. And who's got the true SME, subject matter expertise, who's got that true ability to do it. And if it's ADP and we belong to do it and we're already experts and we know we can get it done, that's probably the best way to do it. On the flip side, we got to be really honest with ourselves. Like if we're not going to be the best builders in this category, or we're already not the experts in this category, why would we do that? Like, why would we not consider partnering strategically? And fortunately, today in the code environment we live in, you could do white labels in a really meaningful way. Like you can integrate in a really meaningful way, and the subtlety between building organically versus integrating is a subtlety that for most buyers works beautifully. So the strategic partnerships work extremely well when you vet that one out, and it allows you to get to market potentially faster. And it doesn't become a really big spend of an investment to build a strategic partnership. Now, ultimately, you're sharing in the revenue between, three parties here. Client pays, and then you share in the revenue between ADP and said partner. So that one has a lot of merit, but so does investing and so does acquiring along the way. So like a lot goes into it, but it's a really fun due diligence. And when companies look at that the right way, the answer usually lies in accuracy. If you put the right effort, the right due diligence, you really challenge, from a 360 view, the outcome is the right decision. And back to Workforce Suite, like that was the right decision. We just had to build the right plan to invest in it accordingly. But the acquisition isn't the only way, because like you can't just keep acquiring, because then eventually, you got a lot of cobbled together scenarios that don't make sense, right? So, there's a method to the madness, and that's what makes ADP unique as a technology company is we do play in all four legs of the stool and play pretty fluidly. And I said I was going to maybe give an example, but there's plenty of great examples of, scenarios where we are in a category, but we decide we want to partner, and we might go down a road of strategic partnership and embedded solutions, and then we may say, hey, we love that, and it's working really well. Let's invest into that company. And then the logical next step at that point, if we're already kind of a silent investor, is potentially acquiring, and that life cycle is a really logical life cycle, and is a journey that often happens. And sometimes everyone doesn't know that that's a journey that we're going on, but it's a really natural journey, and is something that allows us to move pretty fast along the way and pretty accurately along the way. Have you heard that like story of the convergence of you can't get good fast and cheap like that? I'm sure that
Absolutely. Yeah. And
lost.
what I'm telling you, so Workforce software, that is great software. You guys got it in the platform within a year. It wasn't cheap.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
it. It was a unicorn.
Yeah.
It was kind of a unicorn, but sometimes you got to pay for a unicorn,
Exactly.
along the way,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you're painting this picture of, in some ways, I'm thinking of ADP now as like a venture capital firm or private equity firm, right? We have all these bets, and we have different holding companies, different product suites. So when we think about not just some of the partnering, some of the acquisitions, but more some of the internal strategy. I think that's where we've seen a lot from ADP on the global front. And I think maybe before we get into the strategy and kind of what direction you guys are heading, tell me a little bit more about what you guys have seen on the ground from businesses, especially in the mid market, and how global has become really table stakes recently.
Yeah, listen, it's been an incredible journey, and I started, in this role paying attention to global immediately 5 years ago. So, I have a relative short life cycle of, heavily paying attention to it. And 5 years ago, in our mid market, roughly companies, 100 to 1,000 space, there was about a 15% clip of companies that had a global footprint 5 years ago holistically, in the US, and that's still a pretty strong footprint, right? But often those companies were bricks and mortar in other countries that in their kind of product life cycle or sector they were in, it made sense to have that, footprint globally. And what has happened, or at least what I've seen in the last, 5 years, is the need for talent, the scarcity of talent, the cost of talent, and really COVID and work from anywhere world has just accelerated. And the reality is that talent isn't the only reason that companies are expanding globally, but that is one of the key reasons. And, today you may be able to open your borders past just the US to find amazing talent. And there is talent across the world that could be better, potentially cheaper, that you could plug into your organization, virtually seamlessly and move faster and really even move faster because you got time zones playing to your advantage. You could kind of look at 24 hours in the workday and not feel like you're asking a US employee to work 24 hours in a workday, right? So like, if you're really intentional about your expansion, the global talent really becomes attractive. And I think that has been one of the key reasons. Now, past that, I also see the expansion globally of opening up, bricks and mortar offices or countries, what have you, are expanding equally as well, because, buyers are across the globe and the ability to expand across the globe becomes easier from a technology standpoint. So, the math that we're tracking, that same about 15% footprint 5 years ago is now right around 30 to 35, depending on the numbers. So, I've tracked it for almost double. So almost double the companies US based have some element of a global footprint. And again, that global footprint may not be that they're putting in offices globally. It could just be that you and I have a business, Brett, and we decide, we're going to look to India, or we're going to look to, England, or we're going to look to different countries to hire some employees along the way. So like that would be theoretically a global footprint because you still have to pay and handle, compliance, that way. So I think that's at least my view. Is that similar to what you see too, Brett? Do you see anything kind of different?
Completely see the same thing. You mentioned the newsletter earlier. The number one question I said I was following this year is this theory of a global all-in-one. But for us, go pre-COVID days when we would talk to clients, global would kind of come up accidentally. It would come up in rare cases, but it was not something that was part of the conversation. Now it's a conversation we're having on the first call every time. You don't have any global employees? Are you sure? What about next year? It's like it's coming.
That's
It feels like for almost every business.
that's a big question because we're starting to see, challenging status quo as a real thing. Meaning, just like you said, like, do you have any global employees today? No. Why not? Have you considered it? Should you consider it? Like, and it all of a sudden opens up a conversation of, by the way, I see a light bulb book behind you, but it's a light bulb moment. Like some companies are like, wait a second, that's a great question, Brett. Like, should we consider that?
Yeah, and
And
we want to future proof their tech stack, right? And so even if they don't have it today, I don't want to put you on something that's just really domestic and not really set up for global if that's potentially on the horizon. So it's a huge consideration for us. And I tell a story a lot of buyers who, we're not always catching people at the first stop in their journey. A lot of times they're further along in their process and then they discover us. And so when we come to those folks, a lot of times they're fatigued because they've been looking for some silver bullet in the global space, right? Something that can do EOR, contractor management, full HCM, localized at every country, and deep global payroll in each country. And when we sit down and say, hey, that's a unicorn, there's like this wash of relief over their face. And so, knowing that that is a little bit of a unicorn today, tell me a little bit more about like how ADP is kind of aiming at that target and some of the things you guys are developing to really consolidate that global all-in-one possibility.
Yeah, listen, it's a great question, and that is a unicorn today. It really, really is. And sometimes I think it's a bit of a want versus a need from some companies that they want that unicorn. But the question is, do they really need it? One, because it doesn't exist, but like, do they really need it? But listen, we always believe in our foundation that when we do something, we have to do it with compliance, with security, with rigor, with authenticity in each of the countries. Like we want to make sure that not only are we protected, but our clients are protected, and they don't end up in a downstream negative situation in countries that are out there. And some countries are much easier to play in than others, obviously, across the globe. And so when we move with intentionality, and most importantly, with compliance and security in the nature of what we do. So we can't say we will always move the fastest because of that. So with that said, I do believe our belief is that we know the market's moving global fast, and the market's wants may become needs in the future. So like that unicorn scenario might become a real world scenario that they need exactly what you kind of articulated there. And we're just working towards how do we get there fast, accurately, back to cheaply, the circles that are coming together. Because at the end of the day, like, we can't charge a premium that's got no cap to it. So like we have to do things accurately, quickly, but we also have to do things in a way that is like a good spend for the company. So we're going to get there, and we're going to be that unicorn that the same way we've created an entire market domestically, and we're the dominant player, domestically, while we've got a lot of wonderful competitors. I see the same world with global. We will be the dominant global player with a lot of, competitors globally, but we will be the leader. And the same experience that our US domestic companies love with us from an HR rigor, compliance, and paying, is what we want to be able to give them when they have that global footprint. We want to be able to do that. We want them to have the same rigor, compliance, capabilities, integration, visibility, dashboards, all of that. We want to be able to give them all of that. And in many instances, we can. And, Lyric puts us in a really strong position globally, for the right enterprise buyer that has that big footprint, and bricks and mortar in many countries. But, what we also want to solve is that in between. Not every company is an enterprise organization that has, big enterprise needs. Some of them are, pretty small domestic based companies that have aspirations to work towards growth. So we got to meet them where they're at on their journey. And that's really, I think, what the next several years will be, with product investments and operational investments to put them on a really good trajectory to grow on a global scale. Now, maybe, who knows? Maybe global will slow down. Maybe U.S. domestic companies will stop going global. Who knows? Like, who knows what the world brings us? But I would be pretty surprised if the expansion doesn't continue to accelerate. But hard to say.
Well, I've already kept you longer than I was supposed to, so I'll wrap this here, which I know tends to happen when you and I talk, the time just evaporates, but we'll save the some AI future of software stuff for our next conversation. But maybe just to wrap, leave us with, something that 3 years from now people will be talking about with ADP that they don't fully appreciate yet. Like how are you guys going to be differently viewed as we look out just a couple of years?
Yeah, listen, I won't touch global because I think we did that effectively. That is a key pillar. But I'll leave that teaser word AI agents to be what I think in 3 years ADP is going to be all about. We've always invested heavily into AI. We've got amazing examples of agents in our tech today across most of our platforms. And within 3 years, it's going to be a different world. I mean, we're going to be having, agents everywhere throughout our HR tech, and that's going to put companies in a really strong position to be able to, leverage their data points, make intentional decisions and better decisions, and quite honestly, probably cheaper decisions along the way. So I think that will be weaved into the future. Exactly what it looks like, a little bit hard to know, but that'll be maybe our next conversation, is to go a little bit deeper into what we're both seeing and where that world of agents is going to go and so forth. But listen, I'm excited to see you in a couple weeks as well in California. So we'll be together at a conference, an ADP conference, and we'll both get a chance to catch up there. But listen, I'm honored to be with you today, and definitely excited to be part of your ecosystem and so forth. But I'll leave the group that's listening in. If you have any questions about ADP technology, ADP's vision of where we're going, and would like to chat further, I'm always open to talking about HR tech, Brett. I don't know why we both enjoy it, but we somehow do. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
we're sick in the head, but Rock, it's a pleasure, and I'm so excited to be together in person in a couple weeks. So thanks for being here this morning, and thanks for letting us run a little bit long. It's been a pleasure.
You got it. Take care, Brett.
See ya.